This next fellow is a very dear friend. He humbles all of us. His dedication is staggering. He's of Florida, New York, and has been reading his poems from the gutter to the garret in the Hudson Valley and Northeast since March 1995. He's a spring chicken. He has hosted 28 poetry readings since late 1995, currently hosts 4 Hudson Valley Poet Series in Orange and Ulster County. His work has been published throughout the Northeast since 1990. The books he has: Ophelia's Offerings, which is Foothill Publishing, Canona, New York, 2007, Crow Weather, which is Fierce Grace Press, Wilmington, Delaware, 2009, Dickens Raven, Fierce Grace Press, Wilmington, Delaware, 2014, Victoria House, Ghosts and Gothic Poems, Lion Order Music Publishing, New York City, 2015, a new chapter, Gothic Orange, Poems about Orange County, New York, is pending publication in late 2017. His spoken word CDs are Revenant Echo, Sonotrope Recordings, High Falls, New York, 2004, and Underground, APB Productions, 2008. Every October since 2003, Milby and performance artists call Weldon haunt the Hudson Valley as Thurman ghosts in the most unusual poetry and sound performance ever conducted in the region. I've seen it, it's true. I've seen it several times, as a matter of fact. October 2017 marks the show's 15th season, ending atop the haunted old Mohonk Mountain House, 9 p.m. at Halloween night. Milby is listed poet with Poets and Writers Incorporated of New York City since 2005. He is the Poet Laureate of Orange County, New York, for the term of April 2017 to April 2019. He is certainly a freelance thinker. This is a human being with such literary skills, passion, and devotion to the craft. It gives me great, great pleasure. Our own Robert Milby.
Thank you, Hayden, and thank every one of you for being here tonight, especially Florence, Thomas, Raphael, and the rest of the board. I first read poetry here in March of 1999. It's good to be back in this capacity. On the 7th of October, 1849, it was a Sunday, October 7th, 1849, around 5 a.m., Edgar A. Poe died in Baltimore. He didn't use Allen, except in proper documents, but this is an early poem of Poe's from 1827. Spirits of the dead, thy soul shall find itself alone mid dark thoughts of the gray tombstone, not one of all the crowd to pry into thine hour of secrecy. 2. Be silent in that solitude, which is not loneliness, for then the spirits of the dead who stood in life before thee are again in death around thee, and their will shall overshadow thee. Be still. 3. The night, though clear, shall frown, and the stars shall look not down from their high thrones in the heaven, with light like hope to mortals given, but their red orbs without beam to thy weariness shall seem as a burning and a fever which would cling to thee forever. 4. Now our thoughts thou shalt not banish, now our visions ne'er to vanish. From thy spirit shall they pass no more like dewdrop from the grass. 5. The breeze of God is still, and the mist upon the hill, shadowy yet unbroken, is a symbol and a token how it hangs upon the trees, a mystery of mysteries. Edgar Poe. Right across the river at West Point Military Academy, Poe was a cadet, class of 1831, and over several dozen demerits and chicanery that he deliberately caused. He was booted out in the winter of 1831, much to his pleasure, which he'd wanted to be kicked out. And I'll get into some of my own work. And Hayden mentioned the books. There are some for sale in the Steinway over there. And we also have flyers on the glass case in the front of the building. Early autumn heat wave. Early autumn heat wave. It is October and July is an unwelcome visitor on a return flight. The backyard is silent. Newly found dry heat after equinox, whether record or not, unsettling when just 1 week ago, ground fogs and ascending autumn graced the summer-weary fields and groves with new colors from an antique harvest palette. Heat has no place in October, save wood stoves, hearths, or fire pits. Heat is a memory imprint, best left to fond summer wistful reverie. The burden of heat, irreparable alteration to the cloak of gilded autumn, is a ghost not allowed to leave his site of death, a spirit attached to the countryside in a tired elliptical drama. Maple trees are impressionist painters out in the meadow at Woodside's edge. Sugar maple arrives in gradual dream view at dawn. Oil paints, scarlet, borrowed from swamp maple, russet, begged from pin oak, cupric tinctures rising from the soils, orange stolen at midnight from the pumpkin acres. Frost is blended with solar hues to gild the hoary milliner, a treasured vest from the cabinet of Kronos. We await the damps, gossamer breezes of soft rains, chilled mists and memory fogs, allowing the new stage, but only after summer abdicates. Autumn has arrived with her train, farmers and servants, painters and poets. Wind spells are cast to banish summer to southern climes. Wind knells are tolled in reverence to thespian time. Thank you. I finished that this week, incidentally. I'm dedicating my reading to this young lady right here. I knew her in 1759, New Orleans. Roger Aplin just accepted this one for Waymark, and I'm quite pleased. First time it was published. October Red. Red on her crimson blue dress. Red leaking on her dawn blue shawl. Sunlight holds her roseate morning aloft. Tarot fragments atop a maple. In crimson sheets tease her gown. Scarlet statements scatter to the ground. Dew glistens on remains of night's shadows. Cold lawns, bare feet no longer abound. Red soaks her leaf-brushed sweater. Wet stones lost to time-burned weather. October red, the maple's garments. October scarlet, Virginia creeper. October's tannic fire in fading twilight. A late harvest bushel for a dying season of light. Thank you. And the maple tree outside my bedroom window thanks you. That's what that's about. This one is tough to read because it has to do with something that I am mordantly opposed to, and that's black bear hunting. And I think there were over 600 black bears killed in New Jersey this week. That is this week. In the Catskills, she did not raise them to be rugs, the agony and the estrus. Endless battles between the men, springtide hug, cave dark, heavy, hot den. She did not whelp them to be rugs, hung on a wall, sunlight on entrails, necklace claws, bangles on hairless arms above another kind of pulse. Decorations of endless hunters, scales and scalps, stats, pungent smoke, dark, biting liquid on late autumn mornings. She raised them, treats behind the dead oak, teats in a dark cave, young washed clean of birth sac and blood, not musk, must, nor vibrations above in the winter sky, nearby logging road, brush-beaten trail, where wind and snow, sleet and moonglow painted stark acreage after the assassins went away. She was no trophy bitch, her young, no trophy cubs. She was dignified, a pitch-blend cloak lined in winter layers, marm of the hibernation, one-room schoolhouse until spring's elation, mists, joy, and bounding, tumbling in meadows, hidden ferns, abandoned orchards in autumn, and ghost dells. She raised them, this single mother with no assistance, to be alphas, to sire young, to be fishermen, to praise the sun, and hold the pastures from casinos and strip malls, to carry a legacy of the great ones, born before industry, born before the gun. The original name of McQuaid, which is now St. Christopher's, was the Harris Estate in New Windsor, New York. It was an orphanage in the 1860s. The Harris Estate. On an old, much-painted wooden porch of a secrets-holding Victorian building, a young man pushes a large broom. Construction on nearby highway, construction on the campus, disturbing ghosts from a quieter age, an organic age, where people wore more garments, and most machinery was relegated to a city factory, railroad yard, prison, or military fortress. The young man does not notice a nest of fledgling sparrows, impressionist expanse of wisteria cloaking the porch near large Doric columns, bequeathed from a gaslit ancient age. He resides at the estate, once called McQuaid, now St. Christopher's. This is his home, his salvation. Daylilies hold perennial fire, yet the greatest triumphs and sufferings are discussed at the height of each season in shadowed limbs of the advocate oaks and spirits cast from local farm memory, the manor's attic, loose floorboards, forgotten root cellars and damp basement, voices from servants' staircases, sibilant north wind conflicted through creaking black maples. Vapors rise from the Hudson and travel to speak with lost laborers, forgotten farriers, and waifs from the great city to refuge in the valley. Descendants of farmers have no memory of soil, of coal, but work in commercial grave plots they've shoveled themselves into. Descendants of slaves validate the evidence of societal blemishes, inequality still papered over, but articulated through electric deception and mind-numbing technologies of an irrelevant landscape. On an old, much-haunted, condemned porch of a secret-holding Victorian manor, ghosts push wisteria vines and dress visitors in chilled embraces while opening the front door to the Harris estate. Office workers hear cows in the early morning, despite cows not having walked the grounds in over 100 years. Crows, visiting from Hudson's banks, record the human drama in guttural poetry, wind words, and beak music. This is their home, the ghost's salvation. Thank you. Going over to the Impressionist painter's farm, Kurt Seligman in Sugarloaf, New York. This is one of several poems I've written about Kurt Seligman. Time's turpentine. I had a headache for days before venturing to Seligman's farm. Where's the bullet hole, Kurt? There is no art in forensics. Did the ancient ones pull the trigger on that cold rural morning in January over 50 years ago? Sunrise contemplations shook a volley of crows from your breathing canvas, shot into an earned-gray sky, returned in haunted snow. Who pulled the trigger, opening a door that the key to your book never could? Who pulled the trigger, farmer? The white oaks know. The gravestones trembled, grew colder. The cider store turned to vinegar. Potatoes in the root cellar rotted. Your fingers became icicles. The horrors in your heart courting the terrors in your palate. Wind through leafless maples, gusts raising angry snow ghosts, banishment spells of the freight train. The last sound you heard, a railroad demon bellowing through your wintered hamlet. You never consulted ancestors, your self-portrait washed away as the carnival left Basel for the last time, washed in the nearby marsh and ponds, washed from time in a turpentine tributary. Thank you. All right. I have a few from Victorian House. And this one, we're going to stay in Sugarloaf, New York for a little while. Don't worry, we're far enough away from Seligman's studio and farm, which incidentally, tomorrow night there is a large surrealist ball at 7 p.m., which I am not going to. But be as it may, you can go if you want. This is about, I was sitting in a restaurant called the Barn Cider. It was on Main Street, which is essentially King's Highway, and it was reconstructed from a barn. And the wood that was used was, some of it, the planks were 180 years old. And I imagined, I used to sit there for inspiration watching Sugarloaf Mountain. I imagined the English Romantic poet John Keats in the cafe. Rebirth at the Barn Cider. John Keats in disguise sits at a wooden table upstairs at a cafe. November. Sugarloaf in her finest holiday illusion. To his left are the Fates. They are not Cambridge ladies, but they've made a life attempt at dwelling in furnished souls. The young poet smells horse ghosts and damp hay, but cannot figure why the tavern maid avoids him, why no one at the nearby table leaves their coats on while eating. None of them feel the fog, nor taste gray mud near steaming horse dung. Dear God, if Fanny would only appear at the door or emerge from boisterous lunching maids. Sugarloaf Mountain's burnished leaf scrolls fly from pleading maple arms. Their poems are never dead, even as snow silences the commerce of the condemned. He does not leave his soup-glazed table, confused by noises he has never heard before. His urge is to write. He does. The regret rises as salt and pepper shakers levitate and fall from the table. The regret surpasses loud music of voices, momentarily commanding silence. Patrons glance around the crowded dining room. He thinks he sees them. Damp fingers pull at auburn hair. Wind casts oak leaves against strange window panes. Where are the candles? How does this dining room glow without them? The fireplace's conversation is not loud enough to celebrate the entire space. His cough crackles in the hearth. His wheezing surprise, they do not hear him. His forehead, wrinkled, sallow, wet, the stress of chest pain. A napkin where Fanny, as Veronica would have wiped his face, is flecked in crimson on the woolen lap. The wild mountain rinses its hair in an icy wind. Birch leaves slap the windows during ghost-gray conversation. Keats' only volume of poems smells like the sea, grows limp and soggy in his frail hand, begins to drip ink and cold salt water onto the wide plank floor. Shelley walks past in a fog. The fireplace flashes. Flames leap out toward the dinner guests. Unfortunately, the barn cider is closed. But, all right, here's one from Ophelia's Offspring. And I wrote this about, I had been doing some readings in Boston about 12 years ago. I went to visit my youngest brother, Michael, and we traveled all over the city of Boston trying to find the site of Edgar Allan Poe's birth, the Carver Street boarding house, but alas, it was claimed by urbane renewal. Poe called his enemies, and he had quite a few all over the Northeast and the Southeast. In Boston, the Frog Pondians, and it wasn't a pet name. Commons. I am in Boston, October orange hide of maples and blood-shock sweet gum stars coughed to the darkened moss green. Wet cobblestone glaring through fog. She stood, translucent, October raw breath, buildings brooding, licking glazed city stone. We could not get rid of the street musicians. Ghosts climbed up from cracks in pavement and hissed into warm, impassioned ears. Rain is drought deliverance, but not to kids camped by the subway, wearing gothic shadows of subterranean chill, gazing through Marlborough smoke across Charles' turbid gray face to Cambridge ladies, being followed by Edward Estlin's phantom. I implored Sylvia to take me by the hand, hers composed of mist, mine glove-covered but useless against Charles' damp temperament. Take me to Carver, lioness! Take me to Carver, sister! I want to find Edgar Poe! The young poet shouted Whitman yawps over the snow-packed rooftops, his frustration eaten by harbor ravens carried far up the coast. The bearded man in the Commonwealth bookstore feigned dismay, reaction to my impassioned inquiry to natal Poe. After reading mind-wasting propaganda from chapbooks called poetry by safe bourgeois academics, I threw myself headlong into Windwake, quick step to Carver Street plaque, a simple landmark, brick benchmark, rain-stained. Apathy's co-eds brusquely shoved past by invisible hands of phallic brain. No interest, no blood, no passion, and not a trace of Poe. Carver Street eaten years ago by urbane renewal. Sterile brick walk, not a whisper imprint of the boarding house, not a ghost of an autumn tree. The park across the street mocked me. Did he walk there upon his return? The rain, like tiny gray tongues, fell from blushing maple leaves. Boston is an angry Irish mob, and even today's commerce is wealth uncommon to laborers and factory workers. Slaves come in more shades than brown and black in Boston now. If Robert Lowell stood on the sidewalk with me, he'd fly home to write a manic requiem for the Bulgarian woman who said she'd not heard of Poe. It would keep him from strangling her. Over 20 colleges, an incendiary performance at a Cambridge gallery, but not a single woman awake. Common Boston, common America. I'm not in Boston. All right, I haven't been chased out yet. This next one is for several great architects of the 19th century, one being Richard Morris Hunt, who essentially designed this building, and his colleagues were Calvert Vaux from England and people like that, Frederick Law Olmsted. And I'm pretty obsessed with Calvert Vaux for many reasons, not least of which is Central Park and the Middletown Psychiatric Center. But what's also interesting to me is the fact that he drowned. And he was an elderly man. He was sailing well, you'll hear it. Calvert Vaux, architect for Poseidon. December 20th, 1824, London, England, to November 19th, 1895, Brooklyn, New York. I did not think that leaving my England would lead to much fame and such ruin. My Sagittarius flame blazing in my homeland, carrying the torch to America, holding court in the great city and grand Hudson Valley, would eventually sink in Gravesend Bay, Brooklyn, calling me, hiring me as an architect for Poseidon. What would my London know of Montrepose? I never made it home. In Kingston, New York's haunted cemetery by the railroad tracks, my bones hide, my mind alive within blueprints of the bay. They could have laid my remnants under the shade of a grand oak in Central Park, near one of my bridges, over a lover's lane, bestrewn with autumn leaves, one of the fields at the state hospital up in Middletown, my ghost seen only by the patients. 2. Olmsted, your plans and commissions far outshined mine, but I gave to you the gift of old country wisdom, the blueprints of time to break ground in the nascent republic. Hunt, I did not dream of Howland's subscription library with its secret architecture, gables and geometry of initiates, gaslights, chasing ghosts and intriguing them. Downing, your park was a mere sibling of my garden in Manhattan, Child of Eden. In Newburgh, just north of the Grand West Point, I worked with you before the deceptive Hudson claimed you at 36, a map I had no knowledge for. You were a decade older, but your passion and wisdom made you nearly immortal. My life, my fire, extinguished above, legacy complete. Yet below the currents of Gravesend, a new vocation unfolded. Dark November waves, depths of death, fathomed not when in the light of creation. Here was a vacancy in cold New York waters, an architect for Poseidon. Thank you. In the words of the king of New Paltz, Richard Rizzi, wait, it gets worse. All right. This is the title track from the album Dickens' Pet Raven, which is a chapbook, of course. And Charles Dickens really did have a pet raven. And if you've read his novels, I've read half of his canon, and he's one of my favorite authors, probably my favorite. The raven in real life was called Grip, and it was essentially named, it was from Barnaby Rudge. And this raven, Dickens' pet, inspired Poe's The Raven, partially. And thankfully, Charles Dickens actually helped the ever impecunious Edgar Allan Poe. Dickens' pet raven. Rising early in the autumn morning, Dickens startled not a soul, not even the sleeping raven, as he pulled his greatcoat over his frock, grabbed gloves, satchel, and top hat, and quickly strode into that hoarse, noisome street, to the cobblestones, where his leather boots marched towards the poor ward. Grip, the raven, died 2 years earlier in 1841. He was stuffed and kept for inspiration. This fog, breath of the Thames, was an anonymous blanket for street dwellers, no comfort but convenient curtain at no cost to society. Rooks called from docks, hidden by reams of fog, ghosts waving their capes from the cold grey river. Fog, a frustration of the city of London, birthed raven drama and hid hunger from eyes of the elite, called Dickens from the city to the country to whet his pen of criticism, monthly installments of more than fantastic families and villains, but staring satire, from the gates of the workhouse to frost-gray streets of the ghost-infested city. He needed to find his pulse, work for the downtrodden after Martin Chuzzlewit's shy return. The churchyard would seal the fate of his ghostly tale. Autumn's harvest would be carried magisterially into winter. Dickens' black top hat wanted to return to the clothier. Wind sent cousins of Grip to lodge in old beech and oaks, to the mausoleum's frosted hide, its roof treacled in snow. The people, his people, in daily theatrical tales of the street, huddled, muzzled, voices of the poor, not so much a whisper near the ears of the wealthy, beyond distraction of commerce and pecuniary affairs. He would tell Grip as he sat dreaming later at tea. Grip, painted in boot black, son of the Tower, crying from Thames. Grip, a feathered prophet, a worthy annoying pet. Grip, the spy from Marshalsea, from Landport, Portsmouth to Gad's Hill Place, then the mere spirit at Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. But a clown from Parliament, or Ravenous Beefeater, a king of England, a poet, admired by the little ones from dirt-dusted urchins to schoolhouse inmates at Chatham, from Yorkshire's farms to Market Parade, watched from a rooftop by a coal-blackened chimney sweep. Grip, you came to the young writer when he was bachelor-burdened, imagination heavy with poor ward reform, character birth, and sharpening his pen's talons. Why do you sit as a literary landmark alone at that library in Philadelphia, instead of secretly perched as tour guide for Master's grave at Poets' Corner? Your rookery of books, perhaps a bleak house of memory, perhaps a little ghostly tale, but no tireless friend to speak his secrets as he lies beneath Albion's sod while you roost patiently in Philadelphia, waiting for his return to transport you back to your home in the fog drama of the City of London. Thank you. If you haven't had the chance, you should look up some of Charles Dickens' poetry. And yes, he wrote everything, really, in every discipline. All right. There's a lot of, I was not going to read this one, I only have a few more, but I saw a lot of baked goods and cakes and brownies. And this begins with an epigraph from the title poem of the great American poet James Dickey, his book Diabetes from 1970. One night I thirsted like a prince, then like a king, then like an emperor, like a world on fire. Diabetic ghost cafe, dark damp, mold kingdoms, old room perfumed sweet breath, and I am colder in-house than buffeted by the courtyard October breezes. Pungent urine, a potpourri of inner world. Moaning rises, endless chewing of baked bread as chairs vibrate. Patrons sit at a cluttered table, metal spoons like coins dropped against ceramic saucers, muted by fluid in tired cups, plates and mugs invisible, coffee perpetually brewing, gossip and the hint of armpit, onion-damp shirt, stale acetone, ozone, endless cigarettes, coffee, donuts, crumpling of cellophane, the whisper of a match strike, sulfur blended with paper smoke. Gagging commences in this torpid chamber of blindness, sadness, and lost time. The ghost's indigestion, held in stasis above cracked old linoleum, chair leg stained, black scuff marks, voices from the entrance hall, voices from the darkened pantry, cash registers aggression, moaning in the bathroom sepulcher, toilet flushes indiscriminately. Insomnia has her transitory naps, but sugar mania, mood swings are tormented by the leafless ash scraping a cloudy window, fly tracks and grease of so many cooked meals. I emerge from the swoon of beckoning ghosts in this geriatric cafe, not with an urge to run, nor a mantra in clear autumn air, not to walk, but to drive to a distant bakery, to find more coffee and pick the scab of a sugar junkie's haunted delirium. Why not write a ghost poem about diabetics?
You want a cupcake?
Yeah.
It's very fitting that there's only one letter separating confection and co-infection.
You know it. A co-infection is also a super-infection. Right, Margaret? Yes. Unfortunately, I'll do just 2 more if that's quite convenient. And if it's not, I'll do 3. But this is, I'm constantly in front of crowds, and thank God you're not throwing anything at me yet. But, right on, yeah. This next one is kind of sad. This happened, true story. This one is also from Victorian House, up at Lake George, autumn of 2005. There was a boat that capsized. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible tragedy. And it was called the Ethan Allen, named for the great Revolutionary War patriot. The wreck of the Ethan Allen. Autumn's dominion of death stands waiting behind hay bales, stacked pumpkins, scarlet orchard, and tree tourists. 20 elders, most from Michigan, drowned when the tour boat capsized. The old captain was alone. He was not drunk under the sagacious October sun. None of the passengers had life jackets on. Reaper left the threshed, drought-thin fields without a November witch, raised his black cloak as a mast, and screamed a dry winter breeze across quiet Lake George, capsizing the tour boat and sinking it deep in the dark waters of the mountain lake. Ghosts will rise in sublime snow waltzes above silent ice this winter. Even the Green Mountain Boys would have stood in horror on the shore. For what good are muskets against the jaws of a lake? And 20 were lost to Lake George in October. 20 life stories swallowed ravenously by water. The 20 who will never again hold grandchildren. Songs uniting lovers on wedding days long ago shall wail through winter trees. And 20 were lost to the lake in October. Death defies the sun. The survivors will tell their tales of cold sorrow. The old captain will hear voices from beneath the ice of every pond and lake he sees. For the aged captain will feel the dampness for the rest of his life. He did not go down with his ship. The waters are now roiling with rain fever and luminous fog, and 20 were lost to the lake in October. 20 were lost to the lake in October. Thank you. All right. What am I doing with time? Can I do 1 or 2 more? Anybody need to use the loo? All right. Well, I'll torture you with this next one. And then Hayden is going to join me. I'm going to ask our host to play the, well, I see it as a harpsichord now. I'm no longer in 2017. All right. This is about Goshen, New York. The thing about this book of ghost poems is that some of them are multiple pages and we don't really have time unless I'm working with the theremin player, Carl Weldon, and then sometimes, initially we used to go on for almost an hour and 45 minutes. It was pretty devastating. But this is about a small cemetery in Goshen, New York. I used to sit in my car and read and write. A cemetery in Goshen. The November sky pours deliberate crows washed from private thoughts behind a massive Celtic cross, lichen brushed by rough thighs of a gray wind. November winds seduce each other in the watching cemetery. I read Dickinson, and following her carriage, just ourselves with strong coffee after spilling it on my book. The dead would prefer that I leave. I impress them with dark verses. An old man walks out of a mausoleum, past my car, from the past to the bars of iron and through them. Oak oil breath emerges, but there is no nearby woodpile. Farm ghosts rise from rain-darkened sod through scattered leaves, tireless sentries of the naked orchard, dressing her in their dream fog to protect her slender limbs from the withering winter cold. Thank you. And now for our last piece. This is our great pianist, Hayden Wayne. I have seen him in the watchfires of 1,000 circling camps. The Battle Hymn of the Republic by Julia Ward Howe. Howland's Library. It is not the strange art hanging on the walls, nor is it the poetry. The general does not like the free verse, but the grandfather's clock stands again, a metronome, as the first bow walks across the cello's ribs, sweeps the catgut viola hair, and our general nods in approval. The quartet's fervor calls Maestro Mozart, but no one smells the faint, sleeping gaslight breath. The maestro takes the balustrade and wanders stacks of books. His coattails rustle dust, and spider webs dislodge and float to the old pine floor. Ghosts, dreaming of ghosts, look to the chandelier. Once gas flames danced low, admired by tiny brass cherubs beckoning the curious traveler to the hallway of Howland on a dark winter's evening. The violins whimper, moan, then screech. Birds trapped in a locked room. Can the quartet summon Manassas, Antietam, Richmond, in a heinous July afternoon of paranoia and destruction? What can you tell us from the dark secrets of heirloom history, General? Sir, raise the salute to the ghastly sentries posted in your honor aside the entrance at the big red doors. Tyranda is glowing tonight. Your library on Main Street is filling with ghost patrons eager to read your books they'd never consider antique. They wait just beyond the doors of your grand, eerie library. You, General, stand with the shade of Architect Hunt as he gazes from each of the 6 gables, or hovering just over the chimney. Dozens of faces appear in the old volumes stacked in dust and cobwebs on the balcony. Faces of soldiers you once led, friends, family, and patrons invested in subscription. The quartet's passion is rosined in fear, bringing wraiths through the second-floor windows, down the chimney, whispering in the old radiators, calling them from the banks of the Hudson with a tyrant haberdasher, from the storage room at Bank Square. His wrinkled forehead sweats fog, which encompasses the young musicians whose clothing changes. From skirts to gowns, from suit coats to antebellum frocked wool. The general's top hat falls from the balcony as a string groans then breaks. A straining violin held by a terrified young woman. She shrieks, calling on Beethoven as the general stands beside her, diaphanous hands on her psychic brow, caressing her shoulder in comfort she cannot feel, but sees. She sees. The music does not falter. She is alone in Howland's charmed library, Hundreds of whispering crows walk down the grand staircase, scattering coal dust feathers, glutting the hallway. Eyes enkindled, burning to an October crimson. Wings flap to the entrance of the bloodless beloved librarian. The matron leads the young soldiers, Grand Army of the Republic, in indigo blue bellies, bullet holes, or shattered limbs arrive to see their benevolent officer. Patrons disembark. They come from coaches, ladies bedecked in our Victorian finery. Gentlemen in the best of coats, curious to find the tumult of strings, tones walking out into a chilled autumn Main Street. The mesmerized quartet moves their chairs used by poets on Friday nights to allow our good General Howland, Joseph Howland, to stand in the center, while the troops surround their leader and adagios turn bellicose as a drummer boy with his broken stick hanging from a shrapnel-torn hand begins the battle hymn of the Republic, as each member of the quartet sits, mouths agape, empty-handed, as the violins, viola, and cello play by themselves. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Hayden Wayne. I'll see you soon.